People, if you're throwing your scrap wood away, stop it. Stop it right now. Let's make something with it. Let's take these 1x3s and turn them into some tags. And people, don't stress. If you don't have this laying around, you can pick these up very inexpensively at Home Depot. And the length of these joints is completely up to you. I decided to make one shorter, and I started by cutting that first, and then I just put it on top of the other one, measured to make sure the other one was slightly bigger, and cut it down. Now, if you notice, see how you're getting to the end of your board and this is wiggly? Little trick, put a larger piece of wood on the opposite side, hold it in place, and then cut it down, so this way you don't worry about your little fingers getting cut. For our little corner pieces at the top of our tag, I'm using a 45-degree angle cut on the miter saw, and this piece is super tiny, so I didn't want to use the little clamp that the miter saw had, and chance it flipping up, I took another piece of wood and held it down while I cut it. And people, this goes without saying, mistakes will be made, you know, okay? It's trial and error. It's not a perfect science here. I definitely botched this my first shot, and I've cut a lot of wood, so I had to make adjustments and, you know, just work it on in. But eventually I got this. We're not done yet. We're not done. We got to clamp this down and drill a hole in these suckers to create our tag look. So we're gonna need to bring in the drill, and you're gonna need to make sure you got a drill bit that fits the size of the job. I am using this one right here. Okay, this one. And no, I didn't find the center. I just stuck that sucker right down on top of the wood and went, this looks good, and started drilling. Okay, this literally takes like 2 seconds. It's definitely the easiest part of the creating process. Once you're done that, sand them all down. I used a 400 grit sandpaper to get these nice and buttery smooth. But I do want to share with you this. Whenever you're drilling a hole through something, a lot of times the back will get chipped up. I just pulled the pieces off, and we're going to hide over this with some black chalk paint. It's really not a big deal. These are going to be rustic anyway. And if they're not, you could use white paint and just sand it down even more to smooth it out. I wasn't stressing it, you know what I'm saying? But you guys do you. I'm just telling you what I'm doing for these pieces right here. For our design on the front, we're going to decoupage these. Are you surprised? Because you shouldn't be. Now, today I'm going to show you how to blend in your napkin so that it looks like it's part of the wood. And to do that, we're going to use some white matte acrylic paint and some water. But first, I'm sorry. I think I rewatched it like 3 times. Like, why am I the only one that has to suffer through the weird ASMR noises and you guys just to get have everything muted? Anyhow, I thinned out this paint a lot. It is going to just give us a light coverage over the wood. And for those of you that are like, Brandi, why do we even need to do this at all? Painting your wood is going to allow that napkin design to pop through. If you just leave it completely blank, you're going to completely see the wood grains through the napkin, and it's going to not look very blended. It's going to look a little off. If you give it a little bit of a white hue like this, it allows that wood grain to still shine through your napkin, but not so overpowering that the design is kind of canceled out. I hope that makes some sense. Normally I would just completely paint it white, but I really want the napkin design to show through and look like it's completely part of our little tags we have here. To create that blend, so this way it's not just black on the back, white on the front, and then we have some splotchy pieces where we have that wood grain, I'm taking some of Antiques Waverly Wax and a little sponge and just kind of going over the whole piece. And people, don't let me hold you back. You want to do this with transfers, you want to do this with your Cricut and create a little vinyl piece on here. The ideas are truly endless with these little tag pieces. I just thought it was a really cool idea to take some scrap wood you have laying around and create something different. Now, as you notice, I am not bringing that wax on the front where we have that paint. I'm just blending it in. And by the way, these little, you know, plunger pieces, they fit in this hole perfectly, and in like 2 seconds covered the whole thing up. That really saved me a lot of time. Look at that. I let these dry for about an hour before starting our decoupage aspect, but I wanted to share with you that if you wanted to leave these just like this or create these so you could resell them and people could DIY them however you want, that'd be a great idea. Now let's bring in our napkin, okay? And if you're new to me, hi, my name is Brandi. I have napkin issues, and I also sell napkin bundles on my website. If you're ever interested in anything you see me decoupaging or using napkins with, you can check that out. I always have some sort of bundle available there. For our medium, I'm going to be using just regular matte Mod Podge. You can grab these at Dollar Tree. And for our application, I'm going to be using a fan brush. I like to use these because they're super thin around the edges. And whenever I'm doing napkins, it helps me to double check to make sure we have a nice bond to our piece with the napkin without tearing up the edges on the napkin using another product. You guys can use whatever works for you. And people, if you're looking for more information on decoupage, I have a bunch of content on that. I can link them down in the description box. Go ahead and check them out. Keep in mind they are a little tutorialish and lengthy, but they will help you gain some more information on how to do this technique. To help me apply our napkin, I'm just using a dry sponge here and pressing down. This is also soaking up any of the Mod Podge that is pressing through the napkin. And people, in case I didn't mention this before, the iron-on method, whenever you're decoupaging, it's the most flawless way to attach a napkin to minimize wrinkles. But since I create content for you at home, I like to use the sponge method. It's a little bit faster for me. I took the X-Acto knife after the napkin was completely dry and some sandpaper to get everything off. You do not want to sand or try to cut this until it is dry. And you also don't want to apply your top seal until everything is completely dry. But here they are. I love how these turned out so much. One of the easiest things to make out of scrap wood is a little riser, but I can guarantee you've never seen a stain job like this on a riser before. We're going to also need to create some legs, and I'm going to use this little yard stake I picked up from Dollar General and just nip it in the size that is going to be basically the width of our piece. I sanded this down just slightly for this particular project. Now, if you want to get this really nice and smooth, you go right ahead, but I wanted those little divots, I guess you would call them, in our wood piece because we're going to take some mica powder and create a paint. This is going to give us some beautiful highlights in our stain on this wood piece. Now, normally I will tappity tap 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 this stuff out and it makes a mess. And recently I had someone say, Brandi, why don't you just take something to spoon a little bit out, tap it on the table, and then mix it up. And I don't know why I never rubbed two brain cells together and did this. If you've never tried this technique before, I have people all the time ask, what can you do with mica powder? I mix some Mod Podge up with just a little bit, and it gives a nice paint. You can even apply this on glass. I've done this before in videos. It just works out really well and it holds up pretty good. We're taking this beautiful red color and we're just placing it where all the little divots and messed up spots are on our riser. This took about 30 minutes to dry, not long at all, and I did a second coat. And if you're wondering, Brandi, why are you doing cherry? I feel like I do a lot of teals and blues whenever I do my stain art, and I just wanted to do something a little bit different. So roll on with me here, okay? Now, I wanted to blend this into the wood with the stain that we're going to be putting on here and creating. So I took some of the copperish or bronzish, whatever you want to call it, color mica powder and mixed up just a little bit. And as you can see, it's almost the color of the wood. And I did this all around the edges of where we put that red. And I also did a nice big section back here in the back. So as we go along with our blending, everything is going to look cohesive with the little piece, and you're not going to be able to tell where the grain stops with the real wood and the stain and the mica powder mixes. There are many ways to do this, but one of my favorite ways is to take a little bit of antique Waverly wax because it has a nice brown tone to it, especially when you mix it with water. It also has a nice fade look, and whatever color paint you want. to blend in with your stain art. I'm choosing to use this Tuscan red, and I just continued mixing it up until I thought it had a good consistency. And you want to make sure you add that water, otherwise you're just kind of painting the wood and you're not creating a stain with the wood where you're going to be able to see the wood pop through as the matte acrylic paint and the water dry. And you want to make sure you're using acrylic paint and not chalk paint for this. Chalk paint is thicker and it's going to give you more of a solid coverage, and acrylic paint is thinner and it really just kind of tints your wood as you go. I hope that makes sense, people. If not, pop a question in the comments. I'll do my best to try and answer anything. I took a really thin paintbrush and made sure to trace along the wood grains. I started out dark and then just took some water and blended the color back into the row behind it. And I did this throughout the entire piece. Went and followed the wood grain with the darker hue and then blended it in. And you can do this with many different colors. It looks wild right now. It's really dark and you're like, Brandi, I know it's scary. It's scary. Trust the process, okay? At least with this. You can always go back. That's one thing I love about doing this, is you can go back and make adjustments with water and fade it out, so this way it all just blends really, really well together. This took me 3 hours. I will let you know. This was not, whenever I do pieces like this, I know I have to sit down and calculate for the time it's going to take with the blending with stain art, especially when I'm creating a video for you guys. But I love doing it so much. And I think it's such an awesome way to give something you're creating a unique way to kind of pop out in your home. And it could be something just as small as a riser or a large wall piece. For our little legs, I just took more of that, you know, copperish, bronzish color and put it on all the sides except for the one that I was going to put our wood glue and our hot glue to attach our little pieces. And I let this dry overnight before putting a nice glossy finish. If you're going to have this in an area where it's going to get wet, make sure that you put the right sealer on here and make sure you go the whole length of the board. It just looks a little bit more cohesive once that sealer dries. People, this scrap wood project was a hot mess. It wasn't for my lack of trying. Oh no, I gave this my best go. I put some stain art in here, did some blending, I took some extras, different colors, I popped some different things. I just wanted to paint some pretty dandelions with a little bit of a 3D effect, okay, with some cool stuff in the background. But oh no, that's not where this went, and that's not how this turned out. Now let's go back and start this story back at the beginning. Look at this beautiful piece of 1x8, okay? It's a little fresh, it's a little too clean for me, a little too shined up. So I decided to clamp the sucker down and bring in our hammer so we can make this a little worn. You know what I'm saying? Just beat up the board just a little bit, you know, just a little. Maybe, you know, smush in those edges too, okay? Just a little. Okay, when I was happy with that, I brought it in and I painted that monstrosity. But now we're going to flip the board over and we're going to paint a new piece. Waste not, want not. I'm just going to paint the back of it black. You know, the part I messed up on. Anyhow, we're going to need to get our little blend on. And I'm going to do that by mixing a light blue and a dark blue together and adding just a little bit of water. This is going to give me the ability to create some stain art at the very top, and I'm just taking a brush and saturating it with some of that color and then just pulling it straight down the board until it fades out the brush gently. And people, you can completely skip this part. We're just gonna paint some dandelions on here, but I did see a couple pieces online and I was inspired by this piece I seen on Pinterest. But of course, my original design, I wanted to do a little extra and make it a little 3D-ish. And then I was running out of time. I couldn't do everything that I wanted to. started rushing, and then it just looked like doo-doo. So here we are. I did the same thing here and added some water to some Waverly Antique wax and then pulled from the bottom up. Once I was happy with the way that these overlapped, I sprayed a little bit of water on a sponge and then just went back and forth over them, completely blending the two colors together. So this way the middle of the board is really blended and it's lighter compared to the top and the bottom. Then I mixed a little bit of the dark blue with the color I already created for a background. I took a napkin and just blotted some sections over top the piece, just to add something extra into the background. I love making scrap wood projects, and one of my favorite things to do with wood in general is to paint on it and create different designs on it. You are able to get a ton of different textures and looks with the way the grain sets in the wood that you cannot get when you paint on a canvas or you paint on paper. To create the stems for the dandelion, all you're going to need is an angle brush. Pick out 2 different colors of green, mix it with a little bit of black or dark brown. It's going to give you a bunch of different variations, and find the top of the area that you want to start at and then just drag it down. I then took a little bit of black paint and I just tapped on the top of where the dandelions were, creating our circle, and then pulled a couple strings down. I was not perfect with this because I knew I was going to be putting that white and the gray over this, and we were not really going to see these, but in the background. For the top white part of the dandelions, I'm using some Waverly white chalk paint, and I'm using a round brush, and then I'm just tapping and moving the brush down in different sections. You could also use a cotton swab, little Q-tip, if you wanted to do that. It would just make things as easy as possible for you to create the top of the dandelion. But people, let's be real, these are not called dandelions, they're called wishes, okay? Everybody I know calls them wishes, especially my kids or any child I see. When they see them in the ground, it's not a weed, it's, oh, I gotta get the wish. And then you get it all in your face and you're like, oh my gosh. And anyhow, moving on. At this point, I really wanted to go ham with the extra little, dandelion pieces, but I learned my lesson from the first one and decided to just kind of blend some colors in the background and then take some of that black and kind of blend it around the edges, making it a little bit more rustic. But people, mostly, I hope this piece just inspires you to go out into the world, look around at beautiful things, whether it's home decor in a store or it's something online that just inspires you, that you think you might be able to create, and give it a try. And even if you muck up the first time, do it again. It doesn't have to be perfect to be something you love. As always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time.